This morning, I actually woke up singing a song that reminded me of my mamaw that passed away just a couple months ago. It's an old hymn, and it's actually one that I thought was maybe more famous than what it was, because my wife's grown up in the church all her life too, and I was kind of humming it, and she said, "What are you singing?" And I told her, and I said, "Have you ever heard this song?" And she was like, "Never heard of it in my life." But the song goes this way. This is what I woke up singing this morning. One day at a time, sweet Jesus, and tomorrow standing so still. Lord, for my sake, teach me to take one day at a time. I thought it was very, very fitting that was the song that was running through my head this morning. One day at a time, sweet Jesus. Tomorrow, it's standing still. So Lord, for my sake, please just teach me to take one day at a time. That's been a persistent theme in my life. Just a little self-disclosure. For about, almost 20 years now, I've struggled deep with issues of anxiety. Big time. I've actually been on anxiety medicine multiple times, off and on, over the last 20 years. But I remember the very first time where something was happening in me, something was breaking, where I went into the doctor's office and I kept saying, it's like, "Doctor, I don't know what's going on, man, but my pinkies keep tingling." And he starts talking to me, and he's like, "List everything that you're involved in." And so I'm listing at the time. I'm like, "Well, I have 2 kids and a third on the way, and I have a full-time ministry. I'm also a research assistant for the professor up at where I'm doing my master's. I'm a full-time master's student. At the time, I was also recording music with our Christian worship band." And he looked at me and he goes, "Okay." He goes, "Here's the reason why your pinkies are tingling. You're having panic attacks." And I was like, "No." I was like, "No, I'm not, man." I was like, I just, there's something wrong. He goes, "Shane, listen to me. This is what's happening." He says, you're breathing. He goes, "Do you notice that at times you're taking deep breaths because you can't catch your breath?" I said, "Well, yeah, but everybody does that." And he said, "Shane, no, not everybody does that." I said, "Do tell." And he says, "What's happening is your schedule is so overloaded that your body is communicating to you. It is telling you something has to be cut out. Something has to slow down." He says, "What is it that you can cut out over the next 6 months?" I said, "Absolutely nothing." He said, "Then here's your pills." I said, "What are you talking about?" Matter of fact, I freaked out whenever he said antidepressants. It's like, I'm not depressed. He goes, "No, just because you're taking an antidepressant doesn't mean doesn't mean that you are depressed. It means that your body is so overwhelmed with worry and anxiety, so overwhelmed with stress and pressure, that this helps shoot a little chemical to your brain that says everything's going to be okay." I felt like I had failed as a minister of the gospel. Like some of the comments that had been made to me very early in my life, some of my charismatic friends, about like, if you just had enough faith, then you wouldn't have to worry about your mom's sickness. If you just had enough faith, then. But let me tell you right now, I can't tell you how much at that time I was committed to the Lord, how much I had chosen to give everything to the Lord, how much I genuinely loved Him and believed in Him and thought I had faith in Him. And yet sometimes, I'll be honest, even with the immense amount of love I have for Jesus, it's hard to not worry. And I think that's the reason why that in the very center of the Sermon on the Mount, you have chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7. Matthew chapters 5 through 7, the Sermon on the Mount. In the very center, you have discussions of treasures in heaven. And in my Bible, there's a big thing that says, "Do not worry." You see, Jesus knew that even disciples of him would have to be talked about and have to be coached about worry. He says in verse 25, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, or what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? I actually don't hear shame in this. As a matter of fact, I can't tell you how many times I've read this passage to me. And yet sometimes all of the logic in the world, isn't life more than this, doesn't seem to cure the 4 a.m. wake up trying to get yourself to not be stressed about what's happening the next day. Jesus says, look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or stow away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them, doesn't he? Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying at a single hour to your life? Here's the thing I found interesting when I read that this morning. My thought was, it's not so much at times that I don't trust God. It's that I underestimate my value. Jesus knew this. Are you not much more valuable than they? And in bouts of stress and in bouts of panic and in bouts of being overwhelmed, sometimes my own personal value is the first thing to be forgotten. And it's in times like this when I need the Lord to look at me and say, oh, if you could just see what I see. If you could just see what I see, you would understand that you don't have to fight for yourself because I am desperately fighting for you. As the passage keeps going, it talks about the flowers of the field, the lilies of the field. And then verse 34 ends this way. Therefore, after all of this argumentation, after pointing to the birds of the air, after pointing to the leaves on the trees, after pointing to the lilies of the field, after pointing to the flowers, verse 34 ends the passage this way. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. But each day has enough trouble of its own. Here's my challenge for you this week. Remind yourself, however you can, to simply take one day at a time. When tomorrow's standing still, it'll worry about itself. But sweet Jesus, help us, remind us, teach us to just take one day at a time. And maybe, we will be able to see our worth in the same way that God sees us. I love you guys. Have a good week.